on. And Michael, I told you that we're really informal. We'll just be chatting, you and I, about what part of your story you like to share with us and kind of the events and people that changed your life and what your life is like these days. And then anything else you want to add, because I know you probably have a lot to share that I haven't thought to ask you. And so to everyone that's listening, we're really informal. Don't worry about raising your hand. I can't see everybody. You're welcome to either just chime in and ask a question or share a thought or put something in the chat. And then we'll also try to allow some time at the end. So, Michael, I'll let you get started then. If you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then whatever, I know you have a history that is a long story with lots of details. So whatever of that you would like to share with us.
Okay. Well, Denise, I want to thank you again for having me. I want to say hello to some people that I know. Hey, Susie, it's great to see you. Susie and I have done some trainings together. It's so crazy how we kind of end up like after a few months or so seeing each other. So yeah, it is great to see you.
Thanks.
Yes. So my name is Michael Hayes. I am the Executive Director and founder of the Umoja Health, Wellness, and Justice Collective. We are a trauma-informed, resiliency-focused, culturally aligned through an equitable lens, peer-led, nonprofit organization. I know that's a mouthful, but that kind of sums up everything that we do. Our motto is creating community through connection and culture. And when we say connection, we're talking about actually really developing connections with people that we, not only that we serve through our programs, but just people that we run into on an everyday basis, man. We try to live our life and live this whole program, creating opportunities to show empathy and compassion. And we believe in a culture of resilience throughout our whole community. When people see the name Umoja, you know, some people think like, you know, we just serve the Black community. We are intentional about serving the Black community, but our story resonates with anyone who has ever had any trauma that has happened in their lives that has kind of threw their life off course a little bit. But once we realize what trauma is, how it shows up, what generational, systemic, historical traumas, what they look like, we find that people start to really find their authentic voice and can really show them their authentic selves. So we have a lot of support groups here. We have a lot of programs that we do here. But before we get into all of that, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me and how I got into this work. I am a peer support specialist. I'm a recovery coach, life coach. I am a wellness recovery action plan facilitator, resiliency educator, what else? I do a whole lot of stuff. But before all of that really came to pass, I was, you know, it's kind of biblical when I talk about this, but I was actually in the midst of trauma, my own trauma for 40 years. It's like in the Bible, they say, you know, they talk about Moses having to be 40 years in the wilderness, and, you know, 40 years is always comes up, but I was 40 years wrapped into trauma, and I had no idea that that's what I was going through. So at 8 years old, you know, there were some things that happened that kind of changed my life. One was actually my mother's and father's divorce. You would think that'd be a good thing because there was so much domestic violence that I saw that I can remember from the ages of, you know, my y'all might not believe this, but my first real memory of anything happening is I was like between 6 and 8 months old. And I remember my mother running out the house, my father chasing her. I'm on the porch in a little walker, and the door opens and I get knocked off the porch. And I actually still got a little scar on the back of my head where I busted my head, you know, as a child, you know. But I remember that. And my mother was like, no, you can't remember that. I was like, I really do remember that. She said, you were like 6, 7, 8 months old. You can't remember that. Like, yes, I remember vividly that day. And I explained to her what I saw. And she said, no, somebody had to tell you that. But then she thought about it. There was nobody there to tell me. Wasn't my father, wasn't my mother. I remember this. So that's my first memory. It's funny that my first memory is something that's, you know, that's wrapped around violence. But between 8 and 48 years old, I am wrapped and entrenched in trauma responsive behavior. And that led to substance misuse. That led to me being angry all the time. That led to me not allowing anybody to get close to me. I was married, loved my first wife. I love my first wife. I love my children, but I had a problem with people getting close to me because I kept thinking that this mask that I was wearing to hide all of that pain would eventually crack, and then people would see the real me. And I really, really disliked the real me. All right. I hated the real me. During that year, my 8th year of living on earth, I was molested by my neighbors. I saw my first murder, where I saw this, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. This guy who ran a liquor hole, I saw him I saw him like lift the gun up and put the gun in the dude's face. And then I saw the fire. I heard the boom, but it was like I went deaf, dumb, and blind when all of that happened. I saw the boom. I saw the back of his head explode. I watched as the 2 guys wrapped him up in a black tarp. And I guess I must have screamed because I watched as the dude, Robert, came and walked up on our stoop. We stayed in these apartments and walked up on my stoop, and he grabbed my neck and he put the gun in my mouth. And I didn't know the gun was going to be hot. And I can't even recall it really burning at that time, but I had like blisters like in my mouth from where the guns. And he said, if I tell anybody, he was going to kill me, my mama, and my brothers and sisters. And do you know, I never told anyone. Never told anyone about that until about 4 or 5 years ago. But anyway, all of that trauma that happened, it shut me down. When I tell you I was disconnected from reality, I started doing poorly in school. I used to love school. I started doing poorly in school. But then at 12 years old, I took my first substance, and we have this saying that it's hard to get enough of something that almost works. So at 12 years old, I started relying on substances to help me get through the things that I was getting through. But around 22, 23 years old, the facade, the facade started to crack, and I started really the trauma really manifested itself because I really started like acting out, from like overdoing it with the drugs to fighting all the time to, like I told you, like never letting anyone close. So like as much as my wife loved me and she was trying to show me that she loved me, I used to push her away, and it'd get to the point where I would get physical. Like it was just such a bad situation. And then my 2 children that I had from her, now they had to see the same trauma that I went through. So when we talk that generational trauma, man, trust and believe when I tell you I live it, I see it, I know the effects of it. So I'm in and out of prison. I've been to prison 5 times. I've been to the county jail here in Asheville. I've been 33 times now, but I was like an actual resident 29 times. But the last 4 times I actually got to go and do some resiliency training. So I got to leave on my own accord. It was like I had that doors locked behind me and I was spending the night there. But yeah, so I mean, that was my life, man. I had, when I tell you I had so many opportunities to be great at certain things. I was doing theater. I ended up doing one of the first McDonald's commercials that featured the guy Calvin. I don't know if any of y'all old enough to remember Calvin, but I was doing radio commercials. I was doing plays. My manager had me scheduled to audition for a couple of Tyler Perry movies. And I sabotaged all of that because of the trauma I was wrapped in and the facade I had to continuously wear. And I was scared that if it was cracked, people would see the real me and they wouldn't like the real me because I didn't like the real me. So let's fast forward to age 48. I still don't know. I'm not aware of trauma. I'm not aware of generational trauma. I'm not aware of systemic historical. I'm not aware of any type of trauma. I'm not aware of adverse childhood experiences. I'm not aware of any of this. But I'm on my way to prison for the 5th time to do an 18-month stint for a DUI that I was not guilty of. I won my appeal and all of that. Cases dropped. It looks like I wasn't in prison, but trust and believe I did 18 months. All right, so I'm you in jail, you go to court, and then they give you a sentence. So you have to wait in jail, when you're unfortunate like I was. I had to wait in jail until I got shipped to the prison that I was going to go to. All right, so I'm in jail, and we have 16-hour lockdown in the Buncombe County Jail. 16-hour lockdown. So you do anything to get out of that room. Anything. You go to any meeting they have, NA, AA, any religious services, anything that you can do to get out of that cell. It just so happened that the night before, I just made up my mind, like, you know what? Anything I can do to start bettering myself, I have to do it this time. Like, those prayers, and then those prayers get answered, and you don't know they got answered until you like reflect back 2 years later. But I'm like, okay, God,
Hope you muted yourself accidentally, Michael.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. We only missed about half of a sentence. So
Okay,
the last
so
thing we heard was anything I can do to better myself.
Yeah, anything I can do to better myself. So I'm praying that God like just helps me to figure it out what I have to do. And it was funny because as I was saying that prayer, I'm like, God, this isn't a prayer that, I've given you like when I come home over intoxicated and I'm hanging over the toilet like, oh God, I'm never going to drink again. Not one of those, but like in sincere and earnest, like I want to change what's going on. So the next day, a young lady from one of our behavior centers called RHA, she comes up and they're going to do like a study, and then they're going to have like an NAAA group. I'm like, bet, I'm with it. So, they came through with the list. I'm like, sign me up. So she comes through and we go downstairs and we're in the room. So she says, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take an ACES survey. And this ACES survey is called the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. It's 10 questions. I want you to answer them honestly. And then we're going to have a discussion about what this means. So I take the ACES survey. Now, mind you, the night before, I'm like, yo, whatever I got to do. So I'm like, yo, I'm going to be open and honest about this. So I'm reading the questions and I'm like, question 1, yes, yes, yes. Every yes that you answer, every question that you answer yes to is 1 point on your ACE score, right? So I finished answering the questions, give it to her, and she says, now this ACES survey is going to determine a lot, but it's not your end. I just want you guys to know that. So as she's talking about the ACES survey, I'm really zoned out because really I'm just glad to be in a bigger room than my little cell. The AC is kind of flowing, so I'm feeling that. You got people passing little miniature Reese cups around in the class. So, I'm popping Reese cups because I ain't got no chocolate in my cell. So, some Reese cups. So I'm really not paying attention. But then like about 30 minutes in, we start doing some NAAA type stuff. So, some people share. I really don't share. I'm just like, yo, I'm out. I'm good. So an hour and a half goes by. It's time for us to go back to the cells. We go back to the cells. I'm thanking the homeboys for the Reese cups, you know what I mean? And I go back to my cell and I get a call on the intercom and it says, Mr. Hayes, can you please come back down here? I would like to have a conversation with you. So the officer pops my lock, boom, I go downstairs and she says, Mr. Hayes, I just looked at your ACE score and you have a 10. I was like, I got a 10. She said, yeah, you got a perfect 10. I was like, what? I got a perfect 10, doing my dance. Like, I ain't never got a 10. I ain't never got a perfect score. And she said, Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry, but no, that's not it. This is nothing to celebrate. So I'm like, well, explain to me what you're talking about. So this is the beginning of the change in my life. She said, Mr. Hayes, let me break it down to you like this. She said, this high A score and you not like knowing anything about this is probably why you're going to prison for your 5th time. It's probably why you have these substance misuse issues. It's probably why you have anger issues. It's probably why, you really haven't like been stable in work. You haven't been stable in your life. You've been, you've moved around place to place. You've been shifting. But this is where she hit me. She said, but I'm gonna give you the real of it. She said 9 times out of 10 with this ACE score this high, you are going to die 20 years early. You will live 20 years less than you are expected to live. At that point, when I tell you, I didn't see my life flash before me. My wife was pregnant with my daughter. My daughter's 4. I have 6 sons and I love all my sons. I love my children bigger than the sky, which I tell them on the daily. but this is my daughter, and I know my wife is pregnant with my daughter. I didn't know for sure, but I know this time God gonna give me a daughter. And what I saw flash before my eyes was my daughter's graduation. No, it was like my daughter at a like a cheerleading camp, like she was cheering, she like little league cheering, you know what I mean? My daughter going to the high school prom, my daughter getting married, my daughter having children, me as granddaddy, all that flashed behind, like in front of my eyes. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm 48. So I'm 48 years old. So I'm like, damn, 20 years early? When I tell you that shook me to my core, it shook me to my core. And I said, you know what? Something has got to change. And you know what? She said some more after that, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't remember. I don't remember what she said, because the only thing I could really think about is the fact that if I die 20 years early, my daughter's gonna be walking down the aisle without me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That right there was enough for me to like, and when I tell you I'm standing still, but I felt like somebody was like, okay, like shaking me, like, and Denise, I'm gonna tell you, I went up to my cell. You know, I cried. I thought about all the stuff that I did, you know, the people I've hurt, and it was so crazy that at that time I'm thinking about everybody else that I've done wrong, that I've hurt because of my hurt. Because, you know, learning this stuff, hurt people. But not one time that night did I think about me. Not one time during the first 8 months of my prison term did I think about how it was affecting me. What I kept thinking about was my first wife, my second wife, Brandy, my wife, is my current wife, okay, I see my wife, Brandy, my children, especially DeMarcus and Mike, they got to see the trauma the trauma that I put on them, you know, with their mother. I just thought about everybody else. And so I start my prison sentence. I'm at one camp, and you know, the lady from RTA, she gives me like 3 pieces of paper about ACES, about the fact that it's not your end, and there's nothing really on there about resiliency. But it's like, okay, but you can heal from this. But it was really talking about the cause and effect, like really the percentages of like having high blood pressure and all these other diseases and things like that. So I ended up, so I'm at one camp for 8 months, and I'm all the way on the coast. And then, Denise, I got shipped to Salisbury because I had to do a 90-day rehab because it's a DUI. So I got to do 90 days. I'm like, cool. So I get to Salisbury, and it's like probably like 10 o'clock at night because I had to transfer from all the way on the coast. Then we got to transfer at one station. I got to Salisbury. And so when you get in prison, when you get to another camp, you have to go see the nurse because you got to do a physical. So it's like, I don't know, 8, 9 people in front of me, and I'm in the back. You know, I'm cool, I'm good. I'm just, you know, just ready to get settled in. And as I get to the nurse's door, on her door, she has 3 pieces of paper lined up like diagonal tic-tac-toe. ACES and resiliency. And then the last part was about resilience, like how you bounce back, how this is not your end. And when I saw the papers, I was like, oh, you got some ACES stuff here. I'm like crazy excited. I'm mad excited, like, oh my gosh, you got some ACES stuff. So I go in my bag and I show the 3 little raggedy pieces of paper I got, because it's like 8 months, man. I done folded and unfolded them pieces of paper like nightly, daily. So I showed her, she was like, I have had this up on my door for 2 years, and you are the first person that is recognized what ACES is. I'm like, yo, I want to find out some more about this because I just learned it. And I shared with her what I learned, shared with her what I knew on 3 pieces of paper. And as for doing the physical, now this nurse, she was about, you know, she said she had retired from somewhere at 65. She's been at the camp, so she's like 70-some years old. But you can't tell because she got the rock and roll music playing. She got the long hair. She in that head thrashing and the whole 9 while she taking me. I'm like, I like her. But after we finished my physical, she said, listen, so let's talk about this ACES thing. Let me see what you got. So I showed her what I had. She gave me a copy of those 3 pieces of paper. And she said, listen, I'll try to get some more information for you. Didn't think any more about it. But she said, while you're here, read this and let your healing process start. And I'm like, healing, healing. Let my healing process start. Now, I think it already started because I found out about ACES, but this camp, in order for you to graduate for the 90 days, you have to write a 10-page story of why you started, how you started using drugs, and what led to you in prison. I chose to talk about, I chose to talk about those things that I knew were affecting me, but I never got to unpack. So I unpacked my trauma story. My story ended up being 15 pages. And as I was reading it, as I was writing it, like each page that I've written has like mad teardrops on it, because I'm just, as I'm going, I'm just crying. And I'm so thankful that I had a rapport with all of the, because like when you go to the rehab camp, you all stay in one dorm. So those who were in my class were very supportive. They would come by and see me crying. And they would never ask like, yo, Hayes, what's wrong? They'll be like, just pat me on the shoulder, like, do your thing, bruh, do your thing, you know? So I'm like, so it's time for me to read my story. Now, mind you, I wrote it crying. I read it one time when I like to proofread it crying. So now it's time for me to read it in front of 32 other men, all right? Some who have been in for 20 years for murder, for all kinds of stuff. And there's a rule in prison that you never show a weakness. You never show vulnerability in prison. So I'm in front of 32, you know, some of the buffest dudes, some hardcore dudes, and I read my story. And you know, it's only my third time really reading it, you know, really reading my own truth. And Denise, when I share with you that I read it and it was so hard, it even talk about it now, I'm having a sensation release. I'm getting a little teary-eyed right now. But as I read it, man, it was like this 1,800-pound gorilla that had been on my back for 40 years finally jumped off. That gorilla finally jumped off, and I'm reading, I'm crying. You got the brothers passing tissue around because they crying, I'm talking about snot bubble crying, like, but we get through this story, right? Now, mind you, in prison, I'm telling you, it's in a men's prison, you don't show no weakness. But the most beautiful thing happened, and this is why I do the work that I do right now. Let me tell you what happened. When I finished, so I'm getting ready to go back to the seat, and there's this one brother behind me, Big brother Derek, like 6'8", and he was a football, basketball star somewhere on the coast back in the day, and he, you know, we got this thing where, you know, we dap and then we, you know, we hug, but he dapped me and he let go of my hand and he just hugged me with both arms, and I'm like, see, he was like, you know, and I don't know why he did that, because then I was just like, so I'm letting it all out, and then he like pushes me, and he looks me dead in my eye, and he said, Brother Hayes, thank you so much for sharing that, because that same thing happened to me. Another brother stood up. That same thing happened to me. I never told anybody how my uncle molested me, and it had this profound effect on me that I just kept showing out. Then another brother stood up. Out of the 32 people in that class, then these 17 brothers stood up and said that same thing happened to me. Now, I want you to think about this. 98% of the people that were in that class were people of color, all right, out of the 32 people. 17 stood up and said that happened to them. So I want you to think, let's look at that. Let's look at this whole toxic behavior, this toxic, abnormal, these cultural abnormalities that we teach our children, that we teach specifically our boys. Because I was taught, Hayes boys don't cry, all right? You don't talk about it, pray about it. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And all of those men lived in that same type of toxic environment. So we never could express our feelings or our desires, or because we would be seen as weak. But at that time, and they in a prison with people who have been in there for almost all their lives, we started showing vulnerability. And from that point, we started we met after class, all 18 of us, we met after class. And that was one day. Then the next day, the rest of the class is with us. So it's 33 of us having these meetings, just supporting each other. It's 147 people on this whole camp, because the rest of them are doing work release, right? To work their way out of prison. we started having these little support groups the last 3 weeks, the last 2.5 weeks of me being in this place, right? The support group grew from one, the 18 to the 33 to like 50 to 70. The night before I left that camp, all 140 some people that were stationed on that camp, we were outside on the basketball court, all of us holding hands and just supporting each other, people unpacking, people telling their truths, people telling what really happened. And that was the first time I actually got to see what community healing looks like, what community healing really looks like, because it took the support of someone else to help me to release mine. So we all just releasing. I remember what they used to call him the warden. Now they're the captain of the prison or whatever. So he came down like, what the heck is going on? What's all this? There's supposed to be no gatherings. And the sergeant was like, ho, Cap, let me tell you what's going on. This is not anything illegal. This is not a religious thing. They're just out here supporting each other. And, the brother that was talking at the time just kept talking. So the sergeant, calmed the captain down. The captain watched it, and he was like, okay, carry on. And we continued on. That was my last night there. And I just remember that thing lasted. Like normally, like people playing basketball, you getting your food to take back, you on the weight pile, but we were all right there in the center of the yard, supporting each other, starting a healing process. And it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever been a part of. The next day, it was time for me to leave to go to come to my next camp, which was here in Asheville and Buncombe County. And I remember leaving, and the rehab dorm is in the very back of the yard. So it was like 4 dorms that's going towards the front gate to leave. And for me, it's crazy. Like I'm talking about prison like I didn't want to leave, but that particular camp, so I got my little bag, got my tag on it. You can only carry like 1 bag of your stuff. So I got my bag and I opened the door, and it's like a whole line of my people, man. Like I'm dapping, I'm hugging, I'm crying again. I ain't never cried so much in my life, but I'm in prison, I'm crying again. I'm telling my brothers bye, and everybody, we thanking each other for supporting each other. And to this day, I still get calls from some who are still incarcerated. I get calls from some who are free, and we get to, have conversations and we relive that moment. But that time motivated me to start the Umoja Health, Wellness, and Justice Collective, and start centering what we do on like one question, because I just did this question so much when I was like going through school, and like I start showing out. Like I remember my mother asking me, my father asking me, he used to be like, what's wrong with you? Boy, what's wrong with you? What the hell is wrong with you? Why you doing so crazy? It's not the question we ask now. The question that we live our day-to-day lives on here at Umoja is, what happened to you? What happened? Let's talk about what happened. Let's get to the core of that, and then we can start the healing process. And I'm so grateful that we have 2 office locations with Umoja. We have about 9 people or 11 people like staff. I do not have a degree in business or anything like that. I've been fortunate to get some certificates, some that you can see on the wall. But I do this from my life experiences. I do this because I got to see the power of community healing. And I do this to share what has made me the person I am now, because I see it in I see it in so many people that don't sit in themselves because they still in that cycle of trauma. And yeah, man, we want to just, it's not about us changing lives. It's like really making people aware of the fact that they got the power to change their whole outcome, man. And it starts with a lot of us healing. When you look at it, the community that I serve, when you look at our urban removal, gentrification, the achievement gap, the high rate of people of color in prison, justice system, governments, when you look at systems in general, systems has really affected a great community of people to really keep them marginalized. So we try to get people to be aware of what healing looks like, to have access to not only, the tools they need for their own healing, but also have access to all of these other services that are out here that people have opportunity to tap into, but marginalized communities don't. We want to tear down the cultural norms, the cultural abnormalities that start to look like cultural norms. We want to tear down those tables, people like, I just want to see at the table of, I want to see at the table of equity and healing for mental health and substance. Nah, I don't want to sit at the table. I want to tear that table down and build a new table. And that just starts with people understanding what healing looks like. So that's why I'm passionate about the work that I do. My sons that I told y'all about earlier, they saw the trauma, and I had a lot to do with what their ACE scores look like. They've forgiven me, but they're still dealing with it. One is like in the midst of substance misuse. Well, both of them are. One of them just, we just got him into a rehabilitation center. Javante, who was going to Appalachian State, he's such a good kid. But his mom's raised him. I wasn't in a place to, yeah, man. So it's just, when I look at my older sons, I just have to really be transparent and vulnerable, like anytime they ask me a question, so that the same thing that I went through or what I took them through, we have to start their healing process so they won't do the same thing with their children. But then I have an 8, 7, and a 4-year-old who now reap the benefits of a father that's in the process of healing. So,
well, I think I've spoken the least I've ever spoken on one of these, but I'm just moved by the things that you're saying. So don't think it's shocking to me to be so quiet myself. But one of the things, because we do these every Wednesday, and one of the things we've been talking to people who have a history of trauma and about how they found their resilience. And we talk a lot about parenting. And I come from a high background of trauma. I have children who are 21 and 17. And if I've only known about trauma for 5 years, and just think about how different it would be if I was parenting them with this knowledge that I have now. And you just keep telling yourself you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. Yeah. And so I agree wholeheartedly that, being open to hearing what they have to say about it and making amends and changing, that's all we can do at this point. So you did the best you could with what you knew at the time.
Yeah.
Your story is just one of those lightning bolt things for me. I know a lot of other people, the first time I ever heard about you, somebody was talking about your moment of finding about ACES and how transformational it was. And I knew in that moment it's taken me a couple years to get to you, but I've been on a search and a quest ever since then. It resonates, I think, with a lot of people from trauma. It's just that lightning bolt moment where things suddenly make sense for you when you have a life that's so impacted by trauma, and understanding what that all means. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm interested in hearing, so 4 years, transformation 4 years later, is it still a struggle for you to continue to build the thriving life that you have now? And how do you maintain the health and wellness that you've created for yourself? Or are you so on fire with what you're doing in your community that you feel like that really makes it a lot easier? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So what do you mean by, if I just want to get clarification on, do I struggle? Like,
well, I mean, I know for myself, I talk about this on Wednesdays. I literally feel the part of my brain that was engineered in trauma. It's most of my brain, right? Mm-hmm. And so I try to do something new or trauma informed or positive, or give myself a choice between reacting in anger or reacting with compassion. And I constantly feel my new brain material button up against my old brain material, trying to take over. And so I just can imagine 40 years of thought patterns and behavior patterns and relational interactions, and just wondering, because people on here from trauma are listening to, how do I make changes in my life? How do you keep those changes going?
So my struggle, that struggle is daily. But So I've learned to give myself grace. I am only human. I am far from perfect. Hell, for 40 years, I was like probably the most imperfect. So no, I'm not perfect. I have days, I have minutes where I can be who, and then something can happen and I get offline and I'm like, I can go back to a slam door, make me jump, those type behaviors. But I have to give myself grace. What I don't allow myself to do is start to wallow in shame. Okay. I don't, I know the effect that I've had on my son. So, but I don't allow myself to feel shame like I used to. I really I give myself grace, like, bro, you only human. And then, man, I'm gonna tell you the most beautiful thing about being where I am. I wonder if any of them are here. I got a staff, Denise. When I tell you I got people, let me see. Denise, when I tell you I got people that are trauma informed, and they will not allow me to have these trauma responsive behaviors like I used to have. Okay, she's not here. I think they up at the other pod. My program coordinator, her name is Miss Patricia Waters. Miss Waters is about 5 feet nothing, weigh about 100 and nothing. But when Miss Waters says, Mr. Hayes, it's time for you to go ahead and close the laptop and go home. See, self-care is the most important thing, and really understanding, but having that team around me that says, okay, enough is enough. You've done all you can do. They've heard me like having like phone conversations where things like get intense, and then they hear my voice go up another level or another octave, and they like, oh, Mr. Hayes. You know what I mean? So having that support system is crazy important for me, because this is a community healing type space. So I have that. Oh, and then so my 8 and my 7-year-old, they trauma informed. So, they have their own little way of like telling me to come back online. I'm gonna share this with you. Like when last year, when basketball season was in full gear, and I'm a Carolina fan, and Carolina was playing Wake Forest, and Wake Forest was drilling Carolina. I mean, beating them down. And I'm cussing and fussing at the TV, like, man, what are y'all doing? Man, come on, man, we Carolina. And my 8-year-old, he was 7 at the time, I think. Get ready to turn 7. But he came out of his bedroom, he stuck his head, he's like, Daddy. And I said, what's up, man, what is it? And he did like this. Come back online. And I'm like, all right, okay, I got you. So I'm around people that understand this, like trauma responsive behaviors, resiliency focus, all of that. So I have to, it's okay. It's just like anybody who's done with substance misuse, and you can be a part of any type of recovery community, NAAA, but you need that support group. I'm around a group of people that support this work and support me wholeheartedly, and it's that's what I have to keep myself around. But I also have to give myself grace. I'm telling you, we got to understand it. We only human.
That makes sense. We have talked on here before about relational care. Mary McKinney is a big, a regular member of WCCI, and it was the first time I heard her say this. Self-care has never felt, it doesn't resonate with me, because it's just one more thing that I'm responsible for, and I can't have one more thing.
Right.
Wellness resonates with me. I have to take care of myself to stay well. And she was talking to us about relational care and how sometimes we can't care for ourselves in isolation. Most times that we need our support system around us to remind us to go outside, to remind us to put down the phone, to ask to go on a walk with us. So we've been talking a lot about having community around us to help us with those things. So that makes sense to me.
Yes.
The one thing that I think is so important for me in the work that we are doing is, I keep saying therapy's great. I have been in therapy, am in therapy currently. But you don't have to be a therapist to heal people's brains. You don't have to have a certificate or a degree. You have lived without those degrees on the wall behind you, and with them. And so to hear your story, that somebody telling you about ACES and maybe how that impacted you was so profoundly life altering for you. It just, I really want to call our attention back to how monumental that is for people to be able to be given that knowledge, and how it can just completely shift your life into a whole different perspective. And so just how do you carry that forward? Obviously, with Umoja, you're constantly telling other people about ACEs and sharing trauma-informed, what that means and that lens. And is that, tell me a little bit about how that works. Do you have posters on the wall? Do y'all do community outreach where you share information about ACEs? How do you make that happen?
So it helps that I'm a pretty popular guy in Asheville. There's a lot of things that even in the midst of my trauma, the arts has always been, big for me. So I've had like 30 different dance groups. The Urban Arts Institute was one of our was a program that's now under Umoja, that we serve like 185 young people, dancing, just really doing dancing in theater. And, I had dance groups prior to that, radio shows, just a lot of different, so I'm popular, I mean, not to pat myself on the back, but a lot of people know me here. So when really the whole, it's like my life, like really they like, damn, Michael, bro, what happened? How you changed from this dude that I remember from 6 years ago? And I get to share that. We do a lot of community outreach, but because we have other people here that are also in the community that's going through the healing process, and it's like word of mouth, people just come. Denise, we started Umoja actually in my home. It started with like 4 people, from 4 people to like 8 to 12 to, then we ended up with like 47 people over my house one night. And I'm like, yo, and we got a small house. I'm like, we got to do something about this. So we found a place to start having, classes, but the word had already started going out. But it's like the biggest testimony is how I live my life. And that's how, and then not only me, but people like Miss Waters, Miss Ivy, Mr. Griffin, like all the people that are here, is how we show up now. When people see me showing up different, they see I had somebody in here the other day, in my office the other day, and it was like, yo, Hayes, man, you got a glow, man, like that I ain't never seen on you before. I'm like, bro, this is what healing looks like. And what we found out, so we work with the 5 A's. It's awareness, accessibility, accountability, advocacy, and accompaniment. We just ain't gonna tell you about this. We're gonna walk you through this, all right? But when people become aware of, like, a lot of people aren't even aware of the fact that they're living in trauma. They just going day to day, just trying to survive. And once they become aware of that, how some things that might have affected the way you're showing up, they're like, really? Let's talk some more about that. So we just share with some of the things that we have. We've developed, like I'm a resource for resiliency educator, but we've developed our own resiliency curriculum, which is the HOPE curriculum, healing our personal experiences, healing our past experiences, and healing our privileged experiences for, bias systems. But so we just really make people aware, and then once they see it, once they understand it, then it's like, okay, what can I do next? It was like, for me, it's like, once I started healing, I saw myself, I didn't see myself bartending, or, I'm a chef by trade, but I didn't see myself going back to a kitchen to make a living. I'm like, yo, I see myself sharing this with other people so that we can all see what this feels like. So it's like, so once people come through and they become aware and they start having access to how their body and brain works and having access to understand what trauma looks like, then it's like a change on them. So we just want to be able to provide what's needed to keep changes going so that we can change our community as a whole.
You mentioned 5 things, and we only got, there it is: awareness, accessibility, accountability, advocacy, and accompaniment.
Accompaniment, yeah.
I'll put it in the chat so people can make note of that. That makes sense. You're not only a walking poster for ACES education, but you also live it in relationships and being a positive, consistent, caring adult for people. So that makes sense. I'm going to stop talking for a second, see if anybody, there's been lots of things in the chat. I'm going to make a copy of the chat for you and email it to you so you can see what people are saying, because I know it's hard to keep up with both. So I'm going to make a space for if anybody would like to ask Michael a question or share a thought with him. You're welcome. Don't raise your hand, just unmute and jump in. You're also welcome to type in the chat, and I'll send that to him as well. But Just want to see if anybody has anything they'd like to say or ask Michael. We'll give them a minute.
Don't be shy.
So in 4 years, you started in your house with 4 people and grew to a building with staff.
Yes.
I'm assuming those are grants and
Yes.
that fundraising is a significant part of what you do. We started WCCI in a similar way, you know, a small group of people, and have grown to hundreds. And one of the things that I think is important to say to other communities is don't wait on the money, that you got to go with the momentum that's in front of you. So I wonder what your thoughts were about that.
If you know, and I spoke about my spirituality, but I do believe that each person on this earth is already destined to do something great. It's like you tap into it, you find out what it is, and you go. And it might take a lot of us to go through maybe some of the things that I went through. Prayerfully, it won't, but sometimes it does. But it's like when my healing started, I heard that small, still voice say, Michael, now it's time to share. And then, you know, I grew up in the church. So I always remember that, you know, people will be saved by the words of your testimony, or lives, or souls will be saved by the words of your testimony. So I'm like, if I could share this in prison with some of the most hardcore criminals and, you know, and not get beat up or shanked because I was vulnerable, but got accepted, I'm like, yo, I can go into the world and do this. So I pretty much made up. And plus I've always been a talker anyway. And I've you know, I do radio shows. I've also, me talking about it was nothing but me learning how to be vulnerable. That was the big thing. So for people, for organizations, no, don't wait. And please understand this, without vulnerability, there will be no connection. We have to be vulnerable in those things that we are blessed to do, those testimonies we're blessed to share, and the lives that change that people are blessed to see. Because me changing my life, I honestly say it's great for me, but it wasn't for me. Me getting healing, me understanding all of this was for the betterment of my children and my children's children. Because somewhere along the line, we had to break these generational curses and these cultural abnormalities that, you know, of what a man's supposed to be, or what, you know, we got to stop, man. So yeah, if it's on your heart, do it, man. We started at my house. I bought some food, you know, and it was some good food because I'm a chef. You know, I chefed it up. We did our thing. But those next few weeks, I had no idea that was going to happen. It was so many people the last week, Denise, that we had. They were on the balcony, in the living room, in the kitchen, in the dining room. And like I said, we got a small house at the backyard by the fire pit. But I'm gonna tell you what that night was. It was fathers, it was mothers, it was children, teenage children. It was one family that was 8, 9, 10, and 11-year-old, 2 boys, 2 girls. And we finished with dancing and singing. Matter of fact, me and the fathers got up and did some old New Edition, If It Is in Love. You know, we dancing and everybody's like laughing. And if you could have saw the hugs, because some people had never met each other until that night, but because of the vulnerability that happened, connections are still happening. The connections that were made that night still resonate to this day. And this was like 2 years ago.
Yeah. Relationships heal.
Yes. Yes.
I have a card on my desk. Somebody made it for me and I keep it. It says, number 1 factor to offset trauma is relationship with a positive, consistent, caring adult. So yep. I carry that around with me. I hate to make you try to put everything into an hour. So is there anything that you feel like you have to say before you can leave us, or that I didn't think to ask you about?
I'm wondering, Michael,
I'll be back for. I'm sorry, Susie. Go ahead, love. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering if you might talk a little bit about your work with the more institutional folks. Like you've started doing some work with law enforcement, some consulting with some of those folks. And I know we don't have time for a lot of details, but could you talk some about that? Because that's just so important, super exciting.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. at Umoja, because of the work that we do, because we, it's not new, but it is, we just got to look at things differently. But we are now being contracted through, we have a contract with the Department of Health and Human Services here in Buncombe County to work with those who are domestic violence, intimate partnership conflict survivors, as well as intimate partner conflict offenders. We are also working with the families as a whole when it comes to that. We are now working with the social work with the Public Defender's Office to set up programming instead of them like, you're going straight to prison. We're setting up something like a drug court, but really it's going to be a trauma court where we address the overall issue of trauma and resiliency to try to offset these attempts to send people into the system. We also do some trainings with those who are incarcerated. Of course, that's on hold until COVID-19 is over. But Susie, it is so crazy that Sheriff Quentin Miller, who was the sheriff in Buncombe County, called me last night and asked us to have a presentation prepared in 2 weeks so that we can start getting officers trained in what we teach. So there is because it's like police pull up on, men of color and I'm gonna share this with you. The Latinx community, I have a whole mobile home park in the Latinx community where our officers are. And it saddens me to see like 10 police cars up there waiting on somebody to come out just so they can loot like them and card them, knowing full well that somebody might not have that, but they do that for this intimidation factor. So I'm like, if they pull up and they see all these police cars and they panic, they go offline, that's a trauma response. That's a trauma responsive behavior. That's like, oh, we don't like the police. Like, nah, you just sent them into a fight or flight mode. So if they get up out of it, if they come across, being defensive or defiant, you can't look at that and take it personal. You have to understand what you've done. So we've had these, we had this hour-long conversation and now we get to present to them. So yes, the work we're doing is making a difference, but it takes the whole community to understand that we look at this thing through a trauma responsive, resiliency focus, culturally aligned through equitable lens, peer-led perspective. And that's how we present what we do.
Thanks for sharing that. As Susie was asking her question, you're about to say you're going to be with us for the conference.
Yeah, I'll be with you for the conference. Yeah, so
excited.
I got more. Please, I got more nuggets. I keep a lot of nuggets in the bag.
Well, I've been typing stuff in the chat. Every time you say something that I don't want to lose, I type it in the chat to keep it for myself for later.
So what I would like to leave everyone with is connection. We talk about our thing is creating community through connection and culture. Connection is going to be the key for us to overcome a lot of our differences because, we look at the political climate, we look at the social justice climate, we look at the climate of the world that we're in right now. I'm going to share this with you, and I so mean this, I so live by this. Take time to show empathy and compassion to someone that you don't know. It's easy to do it with someone that you do know, but take time to do it with somebody that you don't know and see the effects that it has on you, not on the other person. And please don't take pictures of it. Don't take a selfie of you showing compassion and empathy. It's not for that reason. It is so that you can feel in your spirit, in your heart, in your body, in your brain, what it really, really feels like to show empathy and compassion and how that thing can really make you feel connected and how that can really change your perspective on some things you might not know need readjusting. It's a beautiful thing to do.
Well, I like that. We had, what was it? This is Kindness Month, and I think last week was National Kindness Week or something. So we were sending people reminders to compliment coworkers and reach out to strangers and things. So that goes along with that really nicely. So we so appreciate your time. I know you have children there with you. For people who weren't with us at the beginning, y'all are doing a learning hub and you've got lots of kids there and still made time to step away and be with us, which we appreciate. So looking forward to seeing you at the conference. I'm sure we'll be talking as we approach that date. Thank you for the work that you do, Michael, and sharing part of yourself with us. It was powerful and profound, and we appreciate you and all that you're doing there. So look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you all for having me. And to the Wooders, it's great to see you all. I'll see you soon. And I'll see a lot of y'all soon at the conference. I can't wait to meet you.
Sounds good. We'll see you there. Hope you have a
Okay.
good rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.